To create the feeling of stereo, I would dub the finished result out to a Nakamichi cassette deck, which was as good a quality as I could get easily, and then fly it back to the stereo pair of the original, and then I'm hand syncing the reels, so the whole sound is kind of drifting all over the place. So I imagine, probably armed by perhaps the help of a mild spliff or whatever it might be, this sound really hit the spot with Tyler.
Hello, I'm Tony from Bonner's Music, and I'm in this beautiful log cabin studio today with composer and music producer James Asher. Now, James has been a customer of Bonner's for many years, and he's also a good friend of mine, and I've helped him actually select some of the keyboards that he's got in his studio here. But I was delighted to hear recently that James has had some great success, because one of the tracks that he recorded back in 1979 has been sampled by rap artist Tyler the Creator, and I've got Tyler the Creator's album here. Now, the second track on here is called Corso, and that's the track that Tyler has created using James's sample. So I'm here to talk to James, and let's see what he's got to say.
Well, I create music in a number of styles. The first main one is centered around drums and is tribal and world beat, and integrates different elements of ethnic material with kind of groove context that I create for it. And then I do more kind of relaxation or chill out stuff, a lot of which I've provided for Orosoma, the colour therapy company that I've done much work for. And then sometimes I'm just kind of experimenting with stuff to see what comes up, and on a whim just trying different possibilities and seeing where they go.
So tell me about your Abstracts album, and how was it conceived, and what kind of unusual recording techniques did you use to create it?
Well, this is effectively my first album, and I was combining acoustic stuff like violin, mandolin, auto harp, sometimes guitar tuned to a chord, that kind of thing, because I've always been a wannabe guitarist, but I'm not one. And then I would combine this with the various electronic stuff I had, whether that's like a Pearl electro echo, or just combining normal speed with double speed, all that kind of stuff. So I ended up with a number of compositions which were fairly sort of random in how they turned out. But I called in to see a publisher called John Gale, who ran a small library called Studio G. He'd done a lot of consultancy for films and stuff, and the idea seemed to appeal to him, and how he put things out then was on vinyl, so he amassed a number of these pieces into an album called Abstracts. It began with playing some piano notes from a Bechstein upright piano, which I was playing percussively and damping the strings at the same time. This was on a piano which I'd actually gained in exchange for some of my first published works from John Gale. And then I added to this a melody on double speed piano, a tambourine, some drum kit which was being recorded via an Alice 6-2 mixer which Pete Townsend had kindly loaned me. And then the end result I thought was promising, and I was using this kind of Oriental flavoured scale, I mean, with a slight nod towards, I suppose, Japanese tuning kind of flavour. And then I had through my day job as a sound engineer at R.G. Jones Studios, I had access to a device called a Marshall time module, which created the most unworldly and weird kind of swooshy effects in a really amazing way, and that certainly added to the character. And then also to expand the quality of the sound, because mostly I was bouncing mono from one side of a reel to the other. To create the feeling of stereo, I would dub the finished result out to a Nakamichi cassette deck, which was as good a quality as I could get easily, and then fly it back to the stereo pair of the original, and then I'm hand syncing the reels, so the whole sound is kind of drifting all over the place. So I imagine, probably armed by perhaps the help of a mild spliff or whatever it might be, this sound really hit the spot with Tyler. And so the end result was part of this Abstracts album, and luckily, given that the hand syncing can cause grave problems with the cutting arm of vinyl, it could have actually snapped it, but I was relieved to hear that it had successfully gone through this process and still survived. So it remains intact as the quirky, oddball thing which I meant it to be.
When and how did you first become aware that your track Oriental Workload had been sampled by Tyler, the creator?
This was in April of 2021. I had a call from Tyler's manager, Dan Jensen, in Los Angeles saying, "Do you know who owns this track?" And so I put them in touch with the publishers who'd acquired the track from, well, originally it had been with John Gale Studio G, then it was sold to Eagle Rock, who do a lot of the videos, like Jeff Beck and stuff. They sold it on to Downton, who had a premises in Covent Garden, and then Downton sold it to Concord. All of this is great, except that as the writer, it doesn't make it any faster to get your royalties.
Is this the first time your music's been sampled commercially?
No, there were two other samplings from that same Abstracts album. One was the Chemical Brothers sampling Asian Workshop, which then became a track called The Sunshine Underground. Later to become a triple platinum album. And then also Uncle sampled Fairground Ghost, which was a track where I had a guitar tuned to a chord and I was playing bar shapes on it and whacked it through some glorious phasing and played various percussion bits on top. And
cool. And how's your musical life changed since these big name acts sampled your tracks?
Well, clearly it's a sort of quite a strong personal validation to have somebody who's as broadly known as Tyler, the creator, which I especially register talking to young people who, a lot of whom seem to be familiar with his work. And I don't think it's done my Spotify following any harm. One of my favourite musicians is Jeff Beck, and I was very sad that we lost him earlier this year. But through watching videos on YouTube of him, I happened upon seeing Hiroyuki, who is this phenomenal Japanese guitarist who was so close in feeling to how Jeff Beck played that I was absolutely amazed. And he also acknowledged that I'd mentioned my drumming credit on Pete Townsend's Empty Glass album and stuff. And he said it would be fun if we collaborated. So I sent him a backtrack where I removed some of the top line melodic elements and to see what he would come up with. And what he sent me just, I thought, blew it completely out of the park. It was just extraordinary.
So I can see you've got a really great selection of the latest keyboards and synths. Can we just talk about just some of your favourite aspects of each of the things that we can see here? So I can see you've got a Roland Phantom 7 sitting next to you there. What is it you like about that?
Well, to be honest, this is mostly used in the role of being master keyboard, and I've always liked the feel of the touch of Roland keyboards, and it does come with a reasonable library. In terms of the other keyboards, so at the top we're seeing the Juno X, which not is the friendliest thing to look at the display of or the architecture in terms of saving programs, but a wonderful quality of sound, which to me is pretty much identical, if not better, than the original Jupiter 8 I had so far back, and absolutely glorious on analog strings, bells, pads, a number of other things, but just a great keyboard to use for those areas. And I've come to know that, and I feel I should be bolder and get going jiggy with the editor and seeing what else I can come up with. But you know, time is short, and The main thing is to come up with something else to make sure the Spotify audience hasn't lost the plot with what I'm trying to do. And then second down we have the Montage, which is Yamaha's flagship keyboard of some 7 years standing now, and hopefully maybe updated, but has a fantastic onboard library. And I mean, there's a great deal to be enthusiastic about that for, because it means that as opposed to waiting for samples to load of a particular thing, you can just very quickly, okay, let's try some Seattle strings or whatever it is, just to get a vibe on what's likely to be working with the idea, and that the idea is the principal thing. Down the bottom we have the Nord Stage 4, the most recent edition, and a spectacular update to the previous version of that keyboard line with this very nice to play redesigned keybed and a fantastic set of factory presets. So a very welcome addition and very musical feeling device.
So what projects are next in the pipeline?
I think the current climate is really much more about singles, which seems to work best for Spotify. And in many ways that's quite liberating, because you don't have to have the pressure of coming up with a whole 12 tracks or whatever it is. It's just an idea is as good as it is, and then I may well have to struggle with the famous genres and tags scenario, because nothing easily necessarily sits neatly in one box. You know, you can try and push it in there, but the reality with the human imagination is that you come up with stuff that's in between categories often. So even though it helps people find your stuff in theory, it's important it doesn't become a restriction.
So what advice can you give to aspiring music producers?
Maybe consider a sane job of some kind.
A sane job?
No, to be fair, there are many different ways of getting started, but I think the main thing to remain mindful of is the people that do love what you do, and there are invariably people who will. It's just a question of identifying them, perhaps respecting what their lifestyle and patterns likely to be, the channels where you're most likely to reach them, cherishing them, nurturing them, spending as much time on social media as you care to, although I totally sympathise with people who think that their interest is more about the creative process itself rather than creating doodles and waggles to keep people interested. But it is an important part of the nurturing the audience.